I sat silently at the far end of the dinner table, next to a tray of untouched pumpkin pie. Across from me, my father's face was flushed red. He had just finished his third glass of wine, his shirt collar askew like the rest of his half-hearted attempt at preparing for Thanksgiving. In that brief moment of stillness, when the sound of silverware faded, he spoke with a hoarse, shaky voice. "I'm in debt to some really unpleasant people." The kitchen froze. My mom slammed her mashed potato spoon down on the table, making a sharp, dry sound. My brother Nick raised his eyebrows, then immediately glanced at me. And unspoken cue we've rehearsed for years. My turn to fix everything. I sat there, chest tightening. The only sound left was the relentless ticking of the wall clock, pounding in my skull. "I thought you promised no more gambling," I said, trying to keep my voice even, though my insides were burning. Dad didn't look at me. He stared into his empty glass, slowly twisting it in his hands. "I need about 14,000. By Monday." Mom jumped in smoothly, her voice sweet as syrup but no less staged. "Harper, you're not married, you don't have kids, and you live alone. You don't really have any big expenses, right?" I looked up at her and gave a tight smile. That "no husband, no kids" line was her favorite double-edged sword. Half pity, half a push to cast me as the family's bottomless wallet. "You mean, because I didn't get married, I should be the one paying off Dad's debts? We just thought you're a little more comfortable than the rest of us," Nick chimed in, spinning his beer can like it was some casual conversation. "I mean, that apartment you're renting, it's not exactly luxury." I clenched my teeth, forcing down the lump of fury in my throat. They had just insulted my one-bedroom apartment, then turned around and asked me for an amount that could have covered a full year of rent. "That car of yours must be worth something," Mom added, like she'd found the answer to a riddle. "That hybrid SUV, you could sell it and probably have just enough, huh?" I set down my fork and knife, every movement slow and deliberate. I bought that car after 8 years of working non-stop. Paid for every dollar myself. I save every month just to keep up. And that money Dad needs? It's to pay off loan sharks. "You make it sound like we've never sacrificed anything for you," Dad snapped, lifting his eyes to meet mine for the first time. Bloodshot, furious, and shameless, all at once. I laughed, not out of humor but because I couldn't stomach the script anymore. "Sacrificed? You mean when you burned through my college fund at Atlantic City? Or that time Mom told me to understand the adults when I asked why there was no tuition money left? Yet we still managed that family vacation in Florida?" Nick cleared his throat. Mom flushed. The table fell silent. I stood, grabbed my coat. "I'm not selling my car, I'm not wiring money, I'm not putting anything on the line for this family again. If you walk out that door," Dad hissed, "don't expect to come back." I turned, standing tall in the thick, suffocating air. Good, because from now on I won't. As the door shut behind me, night had fully fallen. I didn't cry. What I felt, maybe for the first time in years, wasn't guilt for not being the good daughter. It was relief. A quiet, terrifying kind of lightness. I drove through the night, my chest still aching in waves from what had just unfolded at Thanksgiving dinner. But instead of heading straight home, I turned west. Down the winding road of Maple Court, leading to an old 2-story wooden house at the very end. The porch light was still on. The front roof remained half repaired after the summer storm, and the lawn had once again been lazily mowed. My family lived there, in the house they still believed was some miracle gift from a generous, anonymous landlord. Only I knew the name on the deed wasn't Brady Management LLC like they'd thought. It was Harper Ellen Harris. Me. The same woman they laughed at hours ago for living in a shoebox with leaky plumbing. I turned off the engine and sat in the darkness for a while, watching as the kitchen lights glowed from inside. It had been 3 years since I used my entire inheritance from my grandmother. Nearly $190,000 to cover most of the purchase price of that house. I still remembered the day I signed the paperwork, hands shaking so badly the notary handed me a bottle of water. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I gave my parents and younger brother a stable roof over their heads, they'd finally see me differently. Not as the quiet shadow always seated on the outskirts of the family table. I was wrong. I never set conditions, never asked them to pay a dime. I just sent them annual tax notices under the company name. Nicely printed, like a proper property management firm. They never questioned it. They simply assumed they deserved to be taken care of. No strings attached. When I chose to live downtown, in a small studio apartment on the third floor of an old building on Lafayette Street, they laughed out loud. On the rare occasion they visited, rare as a meteor shower, my mother would whisper to the neighbors or building staff that I was still not settled, and that Harper is the kind of woman who doesn't even need a living room. Once, I overheard my brother Mason tell his girlfriend, "My sister lives like some elderly hermit in the middle of New York." The irony? I quietly paid $680 a month in property tax for the very house he was living in. I remembered last winter like it was yesterday. They called me at midnight, said the roof was leaking badly. Dad had a cough that wouldn't go away, and Mom was worried about mold. No one asked where I'd get the money. I sent a roofing company first thing in the morning. The invoice was $6,400, pulled straight from the savings account I had set aside for my first vacation in 6 years. Last month, Mason texted me asking to borrow $300 for gas and some toys for his little girl. I wired it without hesitation. Later, I saw his Instagram story at a Lakers-Knicks game, courtside, VIP seats. I'm no saint, but I'm not stupid either. After leaving Thanksgiving dinner, I didn't go home. I drove to Sarah Green's office, my old college friend, now a real estate attorney with her own firm. She was the one who helped me form the LLC, transfer full ownership of the house under the company name, and keep my identity off every public record. "Harper," Sarah looked up from her files, surprised to see me at the glass door just before 10 p.m. "I have a question," I said plainly. "If a landlord hasn't received rent for 3 years, but has covered all expenses, do they have the right to evict the tenants?" She studied me for a moment, then waved me inside. "Are you ready to tell them?" I nodded. It felt like arming a bomb. "Harper, if you're truly ready to end this game, we can start the process. But once we do, there's no undoing it." I pulled a bundle of papers from my bag. Roofing invoices, plumber receipts, last year's property assessment report. I don't want to go back anymore. I want them to know exactly who their generous landlord really is. Sarah's face grew more serious. "Then welcome to the real fight. And trust me, sometimes, family makes the worst tenants." I didn't say anything else, just nodded. After years of silent sacrifice, they were about to learn a truth they never saw coming. That house was never a blessing. It was a test. And they failed, miserably. 3 days after Thanksgiving dinner, I was working from my favorite little cafe on Spring Street. The kind of cozy spot with soft lighting and the smell of cinnamon waffles that made me feel like I belonged, even when the world outside didn't. It was where I came to focus, away from the sound of leaky pipes in my studio apartment. I had just hit send on my year-end campaign report when the door chime jingled. I looked up from my screen and froze. My mother and brother, Mason, were walking toward me, faces full of exaggerated drama, like they'd rehearsed this scene on the way over. Before I could react, they were already seated. Mom dropped her oversized purse on the table with a thud, her eyes scanning the room before locking on my latte, as if silently judging its luxury. "We need to talk," she said, her voice so low and somber I half expected her to announce someone had died. I shut my laptop. "If this is about Dad's debt, I've already made myself clear. We're not trying to pressure you," Mason jumped in. "We just hoped you could look at this from a family perspective. It's not just a personal issue anymore." I tilted my head. What do you mean? Mom's sister, Aunt Karen, said if we don't pay up soon, those loan guys might escalate. They've started calling the house. Said they'll show up if we don't handle it fast. Mom gently patted my hand, like she was auditioning for a primetime soap opera. Sweetheart, don't let something this small tear the whole family apart. If we have to, I'll pay you back. Every penny, just… For now, maybe you could… Sell the car, Mason said bluntly. That SUV of yours has to be worth at least 20 grand. Sell it, and take the train like everyone else. I stared at the two people across from me. My blood. The ones who used to say they loved me. Because you're our daughter. No one asked if I was still paying off student loans. No one cared that I've lived in a cramped studio for over a decade despite working full-time. No one remembered I've always been the one bringing the most gifts during the holidays. Paying the water bill when they accidentally forgot. Or wiring Mason money for his car inspection, only to see him post stories from a Utah getaway a week later. No, I said. Simply. Mom blinked. What? I'm not selling my car. And I'm not paying a single dollar more. Mason chuckled like I had just told a joke. You serious right now? I stood, grabbing my bag. I've been serious for years. I'm just done being the backup plan for everyone else's bad decisions. Need money? Sell Dad's boat. Sell that fishing gear collection he brags about being worth a Maui vacation. But stop looking at me. Mom called out as I turned to leave. If you walk out of here, don't expect me to treat you like my daughter anymore. I didn't look back. Great. Now you've got another reason to lie to the neighbors. That night, I locked my apartment door tight and called Sarah Green. You still sure about this? She asked. After I laid everything out. I've never been clearer, I replied. It's time they know who their kind landlord has really been, for the past 3 years. Sarah sighed. Then tomorrow I'll send over the full documentation. If we're moving forward with the recovery process, we'll have all the legal grounds in place. It's not just paperwork, I said. I'll need proof of non-payment. Property damage, anything that makes it indisputable. I can help inspect the house, get photos and write a formal report, she said. If they push back, they won't have a leg to stand on. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. Not quite relief. More like the steady clarity that comes when you stop waiting for someone to change. I had given them enough chances. This time, I wasn't going to talk. I was going to act. Monday morning, just as I stepped into the office, the receptionist waved me over with a hesitant look. There are 2 women waiting in the lounge, she whispered. They said they're your mother and your sister. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. This building was supposed to be my safe space. Free from nagging voices. From the pressure to help out. And from whispers. About the tiny apartment I lived in. I walked toward the lounge, and just as I expected, Mom sat upright in a pale blue blazer, while my sister Chloe had one leg crossed over the other, absent-mindedly twirling a wave of blonde hair around her finger. They both turned the moment they heard my heels on the wooden floor. We need to talk, Mom began, her voice low but firm. This is my workplace, I said, not a family conference room. Well, you won't answer your phone, Chloe shrugged. We had no choice but to come here. We? I laughed. Or is this just another installment of the tragic family show you kicked off over the weekend? Mom stood up and stepped closer. Your father's situation? It's serious, Harper. They showed up at the house. The neighbors are starting to talk. Oh. So now you're concerned? I tilted my head. Or is it just about saving face? Her expression faltered, but she tried to sound gentle. Sweetheart, no matter what, we're still family. Families get through hard times together. Family? I scoffed. Was it family when I worked 3 jobs to pay off my tuition because Dad gambled away my college fund? When I pulled $2,300, 0 cents out of my savings to fix a burst pipe, and didn't even get a thank you? Or when Chloe, borrowed Grandma's necklace for prom and sold it on eBay to buy a flight to Palm Springs? Who kept quiet about that? Chloe flushed red. You can't keep dragging up the past. Past? I stepped closer, my tone no longer polite. Those past debts still show up on my bank statements. So why are you here now? To pressure me? To guilt me into selling my car? Or is there a new sob story waiting? We're being threatened, Harper, Mom said, no longer pretending to be sweet. Your father slipped up, and now we're all paying the price. You can't just stand by. I took a deep breath. Enough. All right, I said, pulling out my phone. If you really need help, then you deserve to know the truth. I opened the folder labeled Brady Holdings and handed it to my mom. Screenshots of the deed, tax statements, and repair invoices, all under my name through a registered LLC. The house you've been living in? It's not owned by some kind mystery landlord. It's mine. I bought it with every cent of the inheritance Grandma left me. She snatched the phone, eyes scanning the documents. This is fake. It has to be fake. The originals are at the law office, I said calmly. Sarah Green. You remember her? My college friend. She invited you to her wedding last year. She handled the purchase and helped keep my name off the records. Chloe shot up, eyes wide. You mean, you've been lying to us for 3 years? No. I stayed quiet. I let you live rent-free, comfortably, while I cut expenses, fixed the roof, replaced pipes, upgraded the heating system. Mom tossed the phone back like it was contaminated. Why would you do this? To humiliate us? To play power games? No, I said softly. I did it because I stupidly thought that if I gave you stability, you'd finally see me as part of the family. No one spoke for a few seconds. Just the hum of the printer and the scrape of a chair in the distance. Chloe exhaled sharply. So what now? You gonna kick us out? I didn't answer right away. I thought about all those nights I sat with a calculator, choosing between groceries and utility bills, while they posted party photos and bought new furniture. That depends, I said. If you want to have an adult conversation, I'm open. But if you're here to blame, manipulate, or make demands, then you'd better expect a letter from my lawyer. I turned and walked back toward my desk, leaving them standing silent in the middle of the office. Because now they knew. That house was never theirs. Not really. Saturday night, the air in New Jersey turned sharply cold. I drove alone to the house at the end of Willow Creek, where, for the past 3 years, my parents and Chloe had comfortably called home, never once asking about a single bill or whose name was actually on the deed. They were spending the weekend at Aunt Carol's, according to a vaguely threatening voicemail my mom left after our confrontation at my office. I figured they were using the time to strategize a comeback. But tonight, I had my own plan, and I came prepared. With a flashlight, a camera, and the property inspection checklist Sarah had sent from her law firm. As I turned the key, the one I'd always kept but never used, it felt like I was walking into the scene of an abandoned crime. The door creaked open and a rush of cigarette smoke and dampness hit me square in the face. I coughed, clicked on the flashlight, and stepped slowly into the living room. The once beige carpet was now a grimy brown, speckled with burn marks, remnants of cigarettes casually flicked and forgotten. On the wall near the window were 2 holes, one round, one rectangular, like someone had punched the drywall and left it that way for months. The mahogany coffee table, the only antique I had kept from Grandma's house, was covered in deep scratches and water rings from hot mugs with no coasters. I lifted my camera. Each shutter click echoed like a sentence passed. In the kitchen, the fridge was leaking, its handle hanging by one screw. Cabinet doors sagged on broken hinges, held up with strips of red duct tape. I opened the microwave. It was coated in a yellowish grease, with a burnt popcorn smell that made me gag. I climbed the stairs, the floorboards groaned under my weight, and I could feel a few spots sink noticeably. In the bathroom, I nearly slipped on pooled water around the base of the toilet. Clearly, a long-standing leak. Thick black mold snaked up the shower wall like vines. A testament to months, maybe years of neglect. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and exhaled. Something inside me cracked. Then I walked into my old bedroom. Now Chloe's makeup room. The door opened to a scene that stopped me cold. At least 10 empty wine bottles littered the tile floor. The vanity was packed with high-end cosmetics, and the walls were plastered with pop star posters and sticker-covered selfies. The small wooden chest I used to store letters and childhood photos was missing its drawers. In the corner, I spotted a familiar red velvet box. The one that once held Grandma's jewelry? Carefully kept in my locked apartment drawer. I knelt and opened it with trembling hands. Empty. No necklace. No ring. No earrings engraved with her initials. A wave of cold ran through me. I remembered exactly where I had stored that box. Inside a locked drawer. Once when I came home late from a business trip, the building safety team had broken into my unit after I failed to respond to a fire alarm drill. Maybe that was when they took it. I sat there, stunned. This so-called family hadn't just broken trust. They had stolen something sacred. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A photo appeared. A pawn shop counter in the next town over. With a sign in the back reading, "Vintage jewelry. We pay more for proven family heirlooms." In the display case, Grandma's platinum teardrop necklace. I sat in the middle of what used to be the safest space of my childhood, feeling as empty as the jewelry box now resting in my lap. They hadn't just wrecked a house. They destroyed memories. I stood up and photographed every corner of the house. The pictures, the notes, the empty box. Everything would be gathered as evidence. Tomorrow, I'd send the full file to Sarah. No more helping out. No more, because we're family. Only what's real. Only what's mine. The next afternoon, I was sitting in Sarah's law office, finalizing the lawsuit paperwork when my phone rang. The screen flashed. Call from Valentina, neighbor. I answered, unsure why she was calling. Harper, her voice was urgent and uncertain. Can you come by for a bit? There's something I think you need to see. 10 minutes later, I was seated in her warm, tidy kitchen. The cozy, cream-colored house just across the street from the one I bought. Valentina, a widow in her 60s, lived alone and had always been polite, even though my family had never treated her kindly. She placed a small black USB drive on the table in front of me. I installed security cameras around my house 5 years ago, she said. Partly because there were a few break-ins around the neighborhood, but mostly because I started seeing things next door that didn't feel right. I looked up at her. I didn't know you were the owner back then. But when you mentioned it the other day in your office, I started going back through the footage. And Harper, I saved nearly everything. She opened her laptop. Frame by frame, the clips played out. My father, Jeff, slamming his hand into the garage door when I refused to co-sign a loan. Chloe, sneaking a velvet jewelry box into her car. The very day of that so-called building safety check last year. My mother pointing at me in the front yard, shouting because I didn't come home for family dinner. Scene after scene, yelling, intrusion, humiliation. The footage was silent, but I didn't need sound. Each frame punched the air from my chest. I don't know whether to cry or say thank you, I whispered, eyes still locked on the screen. Valentina reached across the table and held my hand. I didn't interfere before because I thought it was family business. But now I understand. This is emotional abuse. And you don't deserve it. I clutched the USB tightly. I knew this wasn't just a collection of files. This was the key to stripping away the facade they had worked so hard to maintain. 2 days later, I shot up from my chair, when an email from Sarah popped up. Harper's family has filed a countersuit, alleging elder abuse, asset manipulation, and financial fraud. My throat went dry. They really did it. They had tossed gratitude aside and twisted reality into a legal weapon. "We're going to fight this," Sarah said firmly when I arrived at her office later that afternoon. "And I'll make sure they regret underestimating you." We began assembling everything: payment receipts, bank statements showing I paid the property taxes, repair bills, utility fees. I handed over every screenshot and annotated file plus the videos from Valentina. Sarah queued up one clip for review, a moment caught on camera of my father yelling, "She thinks she owns something? That house is mine no matter what name's on the deed. I raised her, she owes us everything." That sentence, cruel, blunt, but undeniable. "I've submitted an emergency motion," Sarah said. "We'll countersue and present claims of harassment, property damage, and illegal occupancy, and if necessary, we'll press criminal charges for the theft of your grandmother's jewelry." I don't know how long I sat there afterward. My head swirled with 1,000 emotions. Anger, fear, betrayal. But then, something else settled in. Clarity. I wasn't the same Harper they used to walk all over. I looked Sarah in the eye. "Let's do it. No more backing down. Worst case, I lose a house. But they lose the mask." That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay for betraying your family, no one will stand with you." I forwarded it to Sarah and turned off my phone. Tomorrow I'd walk into court. Not as the abandoned daughter, but as the rightful owner. And this time, I had evidence. Courtroom 3 at the Bergen County Courthouse was packed that day. I sat silently beside Sarah, dressed in a plain gray suit, gripping my case folder like it was the only thing holding me upright. Across from me, my mother wore a cream sweater, eyes red, clutching an old Bible like a prop. Chloe looked like she was headed to a wedding, not a courtroom. Floral dress, curled hair, smug posture. My father, Jeff, wore a suit 2 sizes too big, but his glare was just as bitter as every time I dared to defy him. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Harris, a woman in her 60s. Known for her no-nonsense courtroom. No theatrics, no emotional manipulation. The plaintiff's lawyer. My family's representative. Opened with a painfully dramatic monologue about a daughter poisoned by resentment and 2 elderly parents being financially abused. They claimed I had orchestrated a scheme to steal the house and heartlessly evict my family. I said nothing. I just looked at Sarah. When Judge Harris nodded for our side to respond, Sarah stood. "Your Honor," she began, clear and steady. "We will present a structured rebuttal, supported by verified financial documentation and surveillance video provided by a neutral third-party neighbor, with no familial connection to either side." She opened the file. "These are the expenditures made by my client, Harper Ellen Harris, over the past 3 years. Property taxes, $19,600, 0 cents. Roof replacement, $4,400, 0 cents. Heating system upgrade, $7,800, 0 cents. Average monthly utility costs, $430, 0 cents. Total out-of-pocket expenses, $47,380, 0 cents. The courtroom stirred. Sarah continued. "During this entire period, the defendants paid no rent, signed no lease, made no requests for improvements, and engaged in intentional damage to the property." She handed the USB to the court clerk. The screen lit up. First, footage of my father pounding the garage door, shouting, subtitled "Thanks to Valentina's help." Next, Chloe sneaking out the back door with Grandma's jewelry box. Then, my mother yelling in the front yard as I walked away. Judge Harris cut the video at 30 seconds. "The evidence is clear. Do the defendants have any response?" My mother stood, trembling. We didn't know. Harper never told us she owned the house." Not saying doesn't make it untrue, Judge Harris replied dryly. My father growled, unable to contain himself. I raised that girl, and now she throws us out like garbage? Sarah didn't flinch. You're the one who took out loans that brought collectors to your doorstep. You gambled away her college fund, forcing her to work 3 jobs. And you're the one who declared that house is mine, no matter whose name is on it, in the 3rd surveillance video. Chloe shot up. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to prove she's better. That video was edited. Miss Chloe Harris? The judge's tone turned sharp. The footage was legally obtained and unaltered. And taking property that doesn't belong to you is theft. If you'd like to deny it further, we can escalate this to a criminal case. Chloe slumped back down, pale and shaking. Judge Harris rested her hand on the file stack. This court does not rule on emotion. We rule on evidence. And the evidence shows that Miss Harper Harris bore the full financial burden while the defendants unlawfully occupied, damaged, and defamed the rightful property owner. Silence hung heavy in the room. My ruling, she continued, is that the defendants have 30 days to vacate the property or face legal action as unlawful tenants. Should they wish to remain, rent will be calculated at full market value, plus penalties for damages incurred. My mother burst into tears. My father cursed under his breath. Chloe sat frozen. As for me, I stayed still. Judge Harris looked at me. Miss Harris, if any party continues to harass you, notify the court immediately. This is a legal matter, not a family dispute. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm. Are you happy now? You won. Is this what you wanted? I gently pulled her hand away. No, Mum. But at least this time, I wasn't lied to. On the 30th afternoon, the final day of the court-ordered deadline, I stood at the far end of Willow Creek, watching a scene I once hoped I'd never have to witness. A rental truck blocked the driveway. 3 movers loading heaps of worn, mismatched belongings into the back. On the lawn sat a ripped armchair, its stuffing peeking through, and next to it, Chloe's denim duffel bag. The one she once bragged about buying on her trip to Cancun. My mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming, still trying to maintain the air of someone wronged by the universe. My father barked orders at the movers, his leather shoes now mud-stained from pacing across the wet grass. I didn't step onto the property, I waited at a distance. At exactly 4:20 p.m. the locksmith I hired arrived. Block 10 dark blue jacket, company logo stitched above the chest. He gave me a quick glance. I nodded. He approached the front door. My mother lunged to block him, her voice cracking. You're changing the locks the moment we walk out? Really, Harper, it's come to this? I stepped forward, calm enough to scare myself. This isn't your home, Mom. It's the property I bought, maintained, and am now forced to protect after years of having my trust abused. I raised you, she screamed. You owe me everything. I met her eyes. You raised me on the condition that I never disappoint you. And the second I stopped obeying, you called me ungrateful. But you're the one who taught me. Any love that comes with control isn't real love. My father stormed forward, face flushed. You're destroying this family over a house? I let out a dry laugh. Families don't fall apart over property. They fall apart when the people in them demand, trample, and blame, without ever owning up to what they've done. Chloe wheeled her suitcase past me, fury in her eyes. You'll regret this. One day you'll be so alone, you'll beg us to forgive you. I looked at my sister, the same one who stole Grandma's jewelry and treated it like a soulless trinket. I've been alone before, Chloe. But I'd rather be alone and free than surrounded by people who see me as nothing but a talking wallet. The locksmith looked at me for the go-ahead. I nodded. The metal click of the old lock coming off echoed like a final sentence. The 3 of them stood there, stunned, angry, and for the first time, powerless. I didn't look back as I stepped through the gate. A week later, I received 3 unread messages. One from Mom, one from Dad, and one from an unknown number I was sure was Chloe using a different SIM. The contents were familiar. Tears, guilt, blame, and the final sweet threat that no one will ever love you again. I hit delete all without hesitation. I didn't move back into the house. Even after it was deep cleaned, repainted, recarpeted and deodorized, I had no interest in living inside a space that had witnessed years of being used as an emotional ATM. Instead, I listed the property with a licensed rental agency. Within a week, a young couple from Hoboken signed a long-term lease with full maintenance, accountability and timely payment guarantees. They thanked me for giving them a fresh start in a quiet neighborhood. As for me, I returned to my little studio on Lafayette Street. 400 square feet. White walls, a tiny kitchen built for one. The window overlooked a neighbor's rooftop. But every tile underfoot, every coat hook by the door. I picked it. I painted it. I installed it. At night, I boiled tea on the stove and played jazz from my beat-up Bluetooth speaker. No one called asking me to cover their refrigerator repair. No one knocked to borrow just a couple hundred, we'll pay you back next week. No one reminded me I wasn't really grown up because I wasn't married yet. I sat in my wooden chair by the window, watched the golden lamplight stretch across the wall, and realized I never needed a house to prove anything. I only needed peace. And for the first time in my life, I had it. No hands grabbing, no voices commanding, no guilt-tripping masks demanding repayment in the name of love. Just me. No debt, no emotional strings, no conditions. And that peace, that silence, was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned. One quiet Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the window of my little Lafayette Street apartment. As I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I'd previously blocked and unblocked. This time, it showed a name. Chloe. Sister. Hope you're enjoying yourself after throwing your whole family onto the street. Mom still cries every night. But I guess that doesn't bother you anymore. Looks like money and control are what you always wanted. I read it without feeling anger, nausea, or even resentment. Just silence. Then I pressed and held, tapped, delete conversation, and watched the message vanish without leaving a ripple in me. Not long after came an email from my mother. Subject line: "Can't believe you did this to us." 3 lengthy paragraphs followed, laced with guilt, comparisons, and the familiar refrain, "After all we sacrificed for you." I didn't finish reading it. I knew what would come next. Their pain, their broken hearts, the closing line warning that I'd one day live alone and full of regret. I closed the email, sat down slowly on the sofa by the window. My coffee was still hot. Sunlight glowed across the oak table I'd varnished with my own hands, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, but clarity. I saw it clearly now. I hadn't broken the family. I had escaped the prison, built on guilt and promises of love. I used to think forgiveness meant silent endurance, that being the bigger person was the only way to stay connected. But love that requires you to lose yourself isn't love at all. For 33 years, I had chosen them. I chose to pay tuition instead of traveling. I chose to repair the roof instead of buying a new laptop. I chose to skip friends' graduations because I was working to pay their property taxes. This time, I chose me. And oddly, no thunder struck. There was only peace. The kind I used to confuse with emptiness, but now recognized as freedom. The next weekend, I welcomed my new tenants, Marcus and Hannah, with their 2-year-old daughter, Ellie. They entered what had once been my battlefield, carrying a pothos plant and a chubby little corgi. Marcus beamed as he looked over the lease. "You're the best landlord we've ever met. Everything's clear, thoughtful, and this house actually feels cared for. I smiled. I once gave this house everything I had. I just hope now it finally gets the love it deserves. Once they finished moving in, I stood at the edge of the yard and looked in. Warm lights glowed through the windows, and laughter from the kitchen echoed down the driveway. Laughter more real and joyful than any Thanksgiving I'd endured there. No more blame. No more family used as a shield for manipulation. The house had been cleansed, and so had I. That evening, back in my apartment, I wrote in my journal. An old habit I'd reclaimed now that I was no longer buried under endless responsibility. I don't need forgiveness, I don't need to be understood, I just need to know that I lived truthfully, loved fully, gave what I could, and now it's time to receive, not from anyone else, but from myself. I looked around. The thrifted painting from a Brooklyn market, the self-assembled bookshelf, the little desk under the window where I once wrote my first resume. The space wasn't grand, but every inch reflected who I truly was. Unfiltered, unbent by expectation. That was something I'd never had before. Another message buzzed. Mom called 10 times. Not answering is cruel, Harper. From an unsaved number. I didn't have to guess who it was. I quietly switched on Do Not Disturb. Then, turned the phone face down. I lit a candle. Dimmed the lights. Sat in stillness. No explanation needed. No defense necessary. Just breath. Karma, I realized, wasn't some mystical revenge. Karma was simply refusing to let people keep hurting you legally. Karma was closing the door, not in bitterness, but in dignity. And once that door is locked, no one gets to bring the darkness back in. Harper's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the only way to protect your peace is by walking away from the people who exploit your loyalty in the name of family. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's clarity after years of emotional debt. In real life, setting boundaries doesn't destroy family. It reveals who never respected it to begin with. True freedom begins the moment you stop asking for permission to feel safe. What would you have done in Harper's place? Would you have chosen peace, too? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, thought-provoking stories about family and life. I never thought I would be publicly disowned right in the middle of my own sister's graduation, before hundreds of strangers, under a sky full of applause and flashing cameras. But that's exactly what happened. No warning, no explanation, not even a flicker of mercy. Just my father's voice at the podium. From this day on, our family no longer has any connection to Emily. And the worst part? I was still sitting there, frozen, as every pair of eyes began cutting through me, like cold blades. My name is Emily Walker, 27 years old, and that day was my sister's graduation, Madeline Walker, from Princeton. I arrived nearly an hour early, not because I was excited, but because I needed to see if they really had the audacity to go through with it. I had suspected it. I just didn't expect they'd choose that day to finish it all. From a distance, Princeton Stadium shimmered like a miniature Broadway stage. Flags fluttered in the May breeze, loudspeakers played celebratory music. Families arrived together, dressed to impress, carrying flowers, balloons, and an overwhelming sense of pride. I walked alone. No flowers, no name on the guest list, no official invitation. At the security gate, a young volunteer looked me up, scanned the list, then frowned. "What's your name again, ma'am?" "Emily Walker, Madeline Walker's sister." "Could you wait a moment, please?" She stepped behind the desk and whispered to a supervisor. A minute later, they returned with a plain white lanyard. No logo, no ribbon, no name. Just one word printed in cheap Times New Roman font. Guest. I had designed the original branding for my mother's nonprofit, the Walker Initiative. I chose every font, every icon. And now they handed me a piece of paper with no soul, no meaning, barely more than a random tag for a passerby. I clipped it onto my coat and walked toward the seating area like a stranger arriving at her own funeral. I spotted them instantly. My mother, Angela Walker, wore an ivory shift dress, a Chanel purse on her wrist, eyes sharp as ice sweeping the crowd. My father, Gregory Walker, stood in a gray suit, phone in hand, chatting with a man I assumed was an old colleague. Between them, Madeline glowed in her black graduation gown and gold honor cords. She looked like a living advertisement for the American dream. I slowed down. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to savor the last few seconds of still being considered their daughter. My mother saw me first. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't happy either. She raised an eyebrow slightly and said, as if I were a barista she'd bumped into by accident, "Oh, Emily. You came too?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "I got the invitation, maybe a forwarded copy." She let out a dry chuckle. "Someone must have missed the final list." Gregory didn't even look at me. No handshake, no greeting. He kept staring at his phone, quietly avoiding me like I was a stain on a fresh shirt. Madeline stepped in for a quick hug, more like a handshake than an embrace. "I'm happy for you, you look amazing." Thanks, I'm really glad you came." Her voice sounded like an apology hidden in a sentence. But her eyes darted sideways, waiting for a cue from our mother to back off. I checked the seating chart posted on a large easel at the main gate. Walker family. Row A, seats 2 to 8. Listed below were Dad's name, Mom's, Madeline's, and 2 honored guests. My name wasn't there. I took my guest badge and quietly sat in the far left section. To my right, an elderly man was asleep. To my left, a child scribbled on the ceremony program. At 10:15 a.m., Gregory Walker took the stage as music echoed around the stadium. He adjusted the mic, smiled, and began his speech as if it were just another polished family moment. "Today, we gather to honor the remarkable effort and intellect of our daughter, Madeline Walker." Applause. Cameras clicking. "But today also marks the beginning of a new chapter for our family." My body tensed. "We've made a difficult decision. From now on, we will no longer maintain relationships with individuals who no longer align with our family's values and vision. This includes our youngest daughter, Emily." No gasps. No whispers. Just the sound of plastic chairs creaking, and a faint gust brushing through the rows of flags. I didn't stand, I didn't scream, I just sat there, hands resting on my knees, like a ghost. Quietly pronounced dead. Madeline looked down. Silent. She didn't object. A woman behind me whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "Did he just say that?" Another voice replied, "Who does that to their kid at a graduation?" I took a deep breath, looked straight at the stage, and knew, this time, they had erased me for real. I left right after the speech. Didn't wait for names to be called. Didn't stay for photos. Didn't say congratulations. While my sister received her honors, I walked away like someone exiled from a home that never wanted me. I strolled down Nassau Street, passing groups laughing, hugging, crying tears of joy. No one noticed me. Just like the past 27 years of my life. I got back to my small apartment in Hoboken as the sun began to dip. The room was still the same, silent, washed in golden light through the windows, ceiling fan humming faintly. I tossed the guest badge onto the table and collapsed onto the sofa like a survivor of a car wreck. But truthfully, that wreck happened long ago. Maybe I always knew. No. I did know. I just thought that if I tried long enough, loved hard enough, maybe someday it would be different. I pulled open the drawer under the coffee table and took out a stack of old letters tied with ribbon. Each one a distorted memory, proof of the twisted version of love I once called home. The first was a Christmas card from when I was 20. A photo of the family in front of the tree. I remembered that day. I had chosen the tree, strung the lights, baked the cookies. But when the card arrived 3 weeks later, I realized I'd been cut from the picture. Not blurred, not cropped. Removed. Cleanly, precisely, like I was never there. I remember asking my mom, "Mom, where am I in this card?" She shrugged. The photo looked better with just the three of us. It was for clients. They need a clear, consistent image. A clear image. I used to think that was a temporary thing. Now I understand. I was never part of the image they wanted to keep. The second letter was from the year I graduated college. I majored in communications at Rutgers. Not as prestigious as Princeton, but I paid my own tuition, worked all 4 years, graduated with honors. No one in the family came to my graduation. A few days later, I received a letter. Not a congratulations note, but a health insurance bill. My mother wrote, "From now on, you're on your own, you're an adult now." And Madeline? When she completed her program in England, the whole family flew to London, hired a professional photographer, popped champagne, and printed the photos into a suede-bound album. I got a PDF attachment in an email titled, "The Walker Family, An Unforgettable Moment." The third letter was last year's Thanksgiving invitation. It was sent to my apartment. But the envelope said Erica Walker, a neighbor who had moved out 2 years earlier. I figured my mother had copied the wrong address from an old list. When I messaged her, she replied, "Oh, must have been a small mix-up. Anyway, there'll be a lot of people. It doesn't really matter whether you're there or not." Tiny cuts, so small they almost felt insignificant. But stacked over more than 2 decades, they became a wound that never healed. I remember another time. I was sitting at the dinner table when Madeline was told she'd be interning at the family foundation, where my mother was the executive director. I had submitted my application 3 months earlier. What about me? I applied too. My mother glanced at me over her wineglass. Madeline had a stronger resume. Besides, you lack leadership qualities. You're too independent, not a cultural fit. I used to admire what they called organizational culture. Now, I call it a systematic filter. I got up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down an old photo album. In the center was a photo from my 8th birthday. I remember it so clearly: strawberry cake, 6 classmates, and my favorite green dress. But in the picture, just Madeline and the cake. I stood at the edge, blurry, like a stranger who'd accidentally wandered into the frame. I sighed softly. My eyes didn't well up anymore. Maybe the tears had run dry long ago. I put the album back and opened my phone, pulled up Facebook. I searched for my mother's latest album, Madeline's graduation, the Walker family's pride. Every photo, every comment, every congratulatory message, it was as if I had never existed. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't mentioned. I checked the family info section. Under children there was only one name: Madeline. Truth is, they didn't disown me yesterday. They disowned me a long time ago. They just stopped pretending now. I put the phone down. I felt no more anger, no more expectations, just a sharp, cold clarity. I wasn't lost. I was erased. Slowly, systematically, and deliberately. And now, for the first time, I was ready to look at that truth directly. Not to seek forgiveness, but to find myself among whatever remained after the storm they called family. I couldn't sleep that night. Not out of rage or sadness, but because a single thought kept spiraling through my mind. If they could erase me from photos, invitations, family dinners, what else had they done that I didn't know about? I sat up around 3 in the morning, turned on the desk lamp, and pulled my old laptop from under the bed. It powered on slowly, the fan wheezing like an old animal on its last breath. I had used this machine back when I worked part-time, entering data for the Walker Initiative, the family nonprofit founded and managed by my mother, like a corporate facade. I still had second-tier access. They never revoked my credentials. Maybe they thought I wasn't smart enough to use it. Or simpler, they forgot I even existed. The screen loaded into a complicated folder structure: finance, partners, fixed assets, internal legal files. I scrolled aimlessly at first, until I stopped at a tiny folder labeled Walker Holdings, Q3 Update. I clicked. A PDF opened with the title Transfer Authorization, Cape Moo Property, NG. My blood ran cold. Cape Me. The only property my father had left me in his will. The cream-colored house, with chipped wooden porches and stairs leading down to the beach. The place where I helped him repaint the fence the summer before my senior year of college. I scrolled to the last page. There it was. The signature block. My full legal name, Emily Grace Walker, bolded above a forged scrawl that was laughably fake. I stared at it. The E lacked the loop I always wrote. The W snaked unnaturally, and the ending stroke was jagged and sloppy. Down to my signature, this wasn't it. Next to it, a notary seal. Name? Savannah Doyle. That name froze me. Savannah was my cousin, Jerry's daughter. The same Jerry who had served as the foundation's accountant for nearly 10 years. I opened another document. A notarized contract of the same transfer, also sealed by Savannah. Then another file, internal meeting minutes. Asset transfer for business use approval. It included this line. Transfer ownership of Cape May property to M&W Holdings LLC, managed by Madeline Walker. My throat clenched. Adina. My sister. The same one who posted photos from her boutique launch in New York, captioned, "A dream realized, built from love and family legacy." I gagged. Nothing came out, but my throat burned. I ran to my filing cabinet, tore open the drawer, and pulled out the will my father had sent me the year he passed. I had guarded it more closely than anything else, because he was the only one who ever looked at me without judgment. I flipped to page 4. Section 5A. Grant full ownership of the Cape May property in the state of New Jersey, to my youngest daughter, Emily Grace Walker. No conditions, no footnotes, a direct gift. They had forged my signature, faked the transfer, used family to legitimize it, then sold it, used my inheritance to fund her business, without even asking me. I closed the laptop, trembling in shock. Not because of losing money or property, but because of the feeling that I had been treated as if I had no right to exist. I immediately called Aunt Partha, my dad's youngest sister, the only person in the family who had ever stood by me. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Emily, what's going on, sweetheart?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you know the house in Cape May had been transferred?" She was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. "Yes, I knew. But your mother said it was for tax purposes, that they had to restructure the assets to make reporting easier." I thought, "You believed her? That it was just temporary and they'd return it?" "I didn't know what to do, Emily. I'm sorry." I dropped the phone as if it weighed 100 pounds. I didn't blame her. I just realized I had been betrayed by an entire system. A system where everyone turned away in the name of keeping the peace. I opened my cabinet, pulled out an old stack of papers, lease agreements, bank account confirmations, and a scanned copy of my real signature for comparison. I needed evidence. I needed the truth, recorded, on paper, with names, with legal stamps. Because they could erase me from the pictures. But I wouldn't let them erase me from the legal record. I turned on the printer and printed all the files I had found. I clipped them together and placed them inside a deep burgundy plastic folder. The embossed word, "confidential," on the cover, felt almost like mockery. I checked the clock. 5:42 in the morning. Dawn was breaking. The first light of a new day slipped in through the curtains. And I knew. Today would not be like the days before. I couldn't sit still any longer. After what I had uncovered, silence meant complicity. And I had been silent for too long, letting them pull the strings of my life like a puppet without a spine. As soon as sunlight touched the edge of my apartment window, I began to act. Holding the folder printed the night before, I called David Stone, the attorney who once helped me settle a lease dispute 3 years ago. He wasn't a big-name lawyer, but he had what I needed now. He wasn't afraid to challenge power. David answered after 2 rings. "Emmy, what brings you to me at 6 in the morning? I need to file a lawsuit. And I need to do it right, fast, and all the way." After a few seconds of silence, David said, "I'll be at the office by 8:30. Bring everything you have. Don't email it, bring it yourself." I printed extra copies of the original will, the PDFs containing forged signatures, the notarized documents by Savannah, and the transfer records showing the property in Madeline's name. I packed everything into a dark brown leather folder. The only graduation gift my father ever gave me. By 8:20, I was standing in front of the small law office on Washington Avenue. David greeted me with a skeptical look, but as he skimmed through the folder, his expression quickly turned serious. "This is forged." "Not just that. It's an entire system of deceit built to erase me from my inheritance." David nodded, his voice lowering. "I'll start drafting the complaint immediately, but Emily, this isn't a simple case. You're going after a state-level nonprofit, a well-connected family. Are you ready?" I looked him straight in the eye. "They didn't just steal money. They stole my identity, my existence. I have nothing left to lose." That afternoon, I called Aunt Thartha again. This time, my voice didn't shake. "Can you help me? You were at the family meeting last year, right? The one where my mom said she was going to adjust the assets?" She went silent. I expected another excuse. But then she sighed softly. "I have a recording, not on purpose. I had my phone recording to remember some financial details. But there's a part where she talks about cutting Emily out of the paperwork to make things easier. Can you send it to me?" 10 minutes later, the recording came through. My hand trembled as I hit play. My mother's voice rang out clearly. "Let her think her name's still on the documents. Once everything's done, we'll just say the accountant made a mistake. Emily's too timid. She won't sue." I sent the recording straight to David. He replied almost instantly. "I'll include this in the filing as corroborating evidence. Even better if you have emails or texts." I started retracing old trails. I still had access to the internal email system from when I worked for the foundation. Fortunately, they hadn't changed the password or revoked my access. A fatal mistake. I found 3 emails marked internal do not share. An email from my mother to her legal advisor. "Madeline needs early access to the Cape May property. I want the name transfer expedited. Emily doesn't need to know." An email from my sister to her best friend. "Mom said don't worry, Emily won't sue, and even if she does, no one will believe her. She doesn't have a place in the family image." A text exchange between my father and Savannah. "Help me with a document using Emily's signature. Just make it look close. It's just for formality." I saved everything. Even though my stomach churned, every word was like an arrow piercing the mask they'd worn for years. A week later, David and I officially filed the complaint in Hudson County Court. The case was titled, Emily G. Walker v. Walkers, the Walker Foundation and Related Parties. Attached were all the documents: the original will, the property map, the transfer contracts with forged signatures, the recording, the internal emails, and the side-by-side signature comparison. I signed the complaint with a strange sense of calm. Not hatred, but the cold clarity of someone who finally understood the war she was in. That night, I sat alone at my small dining table, staring out at the lights of Hoboken. After so many years, I felt like I existed. Not as Madeline's shadow. Not as my mother's flaw. I was Emily, the one who stood up, the one reclaiming her name. And they would pay for what they had done. I arrived at my mother's office on a gray Wednesday morning in New Jersey, the sky hanging low, as if the whole city held its breath with me. No appointment, no warning. I wanted her to know that this time, I was the one opening the door, not knocking. The Walker Initiative sat on the 17th floor of a sleek glass tower in downtown Newark. From the outside, it looked like a PR firm. But inside, it was a power structure disguised as charity, where community projects wore the mask of altruism, while the truth was buried beneath layers of prestige. I walked past the reception desk. The young woman at the front, new, clearly unfamiliar with my face, started to stop me. "Do you have an appointment with Mrs. Walker?" I looked her straight in the eye, my voice calm. "No need. I'm her daughter." She froze. A second later, I was already walking straight down the glass hallway toward the executive office at the far end. I opened the door without knocking. My mother, Angela Walker, 60 years old, her silver hair curled to perfection, was sitting behind her desk. A framed photo with Madeline tilted at a 45-degree angle, just as always. She wasn't surprised. She didn't flinch, not even a blink. "Emily." "Hello, Mother." I didn't sit. I stood. I felt taller than her. Not in height, but in presence. I no longer bowed my head. "It seems you've found out," she began, pouring water from a crystal carafe, like she was hosting a business partner. "I know the Cape May house was sold. I know who forged the signature. I know about the recording where you said, 'Keeping me out made things easier to manage.'" She didn't blink. Just lifted her glass and sipped. "Everything I did was for the greater good. The foundation's reputation, the family's image. That's what matters most." I laughed. Not loud. Not bitter. Just a short, chilling laugh that ran down my spine. Have you ever wondered why that image only had room for one child? Why in the Walker family only one face was worthy of showing up? Madeline said. "Fits, she performs well. She knows how to present herself to the media. You know about me. You've always been too strong-willed, too independent, unmanageable. In this world you can't survive if you don't know how to bow at the right time." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt clarity. Clear like the sunlight pouring through the glass, stripping away every mask. "So you admit it. You erased me from everything because I didn't fit the mold you created." She set her glass down, eyes sharp as razors locked on mine. "You always wanted your own path, well now you have it. What are you doing here, looking for an apology? Hoping to return?" I stepped closer to her desk and pulled a thick envelope from my bag. I placed it down like someone playing the final card in a high-stakes game. "These are copies of all the legal documents. The forged signatures, the notarized files, the internal emails, the recording, and the lawsuit." She faltered. Just for a moment. But I saw it. A hairline crack at the corner of her tight lips. "You're going to destroy everything your father built? My father left that house to me. You and Madeline sold it and funneled the money into a private company. If reclaiming what's mine is considered destruction, then yes, I will destroy. All the way." I leaned forward, meeting the gaze that once suffocated me through my entire childhood. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm not here to beg for recognition. I'm here to say that from now on, I don't need my name in any story you tell. Because I'm telling my own." Angela leaned back, arms crossed, that mocking smile returning to her face. "You think suing us is simple? The press, the media, our partners, you'll drag the whole family through the mud. No, you did that yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights so the world can see." I turned to leave. No permission. No bow. I knew she was watching. I knew every muscle in her face was clenching to maintain composure. And I knew. She finally realized the Emily she once knew no longer existed. Out in the hallway, I passed a row of framed photographs. Major events from the foundation dating back to 2005. each frame a milestone in the family's public success. I wasn't in any of them. But this time, it didn't hurt. Because when you've been erased to the point of invisibility, being seen through your own actions is a thunderous slap. And I had just delivered the first one. 3 days after that confrontation, everything erupted. Not quietly, not gradually. It was an explosion at the heart of the perfect image my family had spent more than 20 years crafting. I was making my morning coffee when my phone began buzzing nonstop. Messages stacked up, old classmates, coworkers, even people I hadn't heard from since college. "Emily, have you seen the news? It's front page now. They're calling it the Walker Initiative's moral crisis." I opened my laptop and logged into Nonprofit Integrity Watch, an independent watchdog organization that tracks charitable foundations. The bold headline filled the screen. Board signatures, shady transfers, shocking recordings, the Walker Family Foundation under fire. Right below it was a photo of my mother, Angela Walker, exiting her office with a face like steel. But this time, there was no strategic smile, no controlling stare. Just tightly pressed lips and tense cheeks. The article opened with a quote from the recording. "Emily doesn't fit the family image. We need a consistent, streamlined face that aligns with our branding." My mother's voice echoed, clear as if she were standing in my living room. The next section was my father's voice, soft but unmistakably confirming. "She used to read everything. We have to make sure Emily doesn't find out until after it's finalized." I scrolled down. The article listed the evidence submitted to the investigators. The original will, naming me as the sole inheritor of the Cape May house. The transfer document with a forged signature. The notary stamp. From Savannah Doyle, a direct relative. Random emails from my mother, referring to my removal as a branding strategy. A message from Madeline to a friend. "She won't sue. Emily never knew how to fight." That last line made me laugh. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just like a survivor reading her own obituary, and knowing she was still alive. By noon, major media outlets picked it up. The New York Post ran a headline. "Behind the Lies. Prestigious New Jersey family accused of asset manipulation and erasing their own daughter." CBS aired a 7-minute evening segment, including interviews with 3 major donors who announced a freeze on all partnerships with the Walker Initiative. And on social media? A storm. The hashtag Walker scandal hit the top 5 trending topics on Twitter in under 6 hours. The recordings were shared hundreds of thousands of times, one user commented. "This isn't a family dispute. This is a silent purge of a daughter who didn't fit the mold." I didn't answer a single message. I didn't speak. I didn't post. I let the truth speak for itself. That night, an email quietly appeared in my inbox. It was from the Walker Initiative's address. No subject line, no greeting. Just one sentence. "We are preparing a unified statement. We hope to include a comment from Miss Emily Walker as a gesture of goodwill." I deleted the email. I didn't respond. They no longer had the right to use my voice to salvage their image. The next day, my mother held an emergency press conference at the foundation's headquarters. I didn't attend, but the live stream spread everywhere. She stood in the middle of the room with a stiff smile, repeating the same old phrases. "Our family is going through deep emotional pain. All decisions were made with the intention to protect the collective. The situation has been misunderstood and taken out of context." Not a single apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But people no longer believed her. That evening I got a message from Louisa, an old friend who used to work in the foundation's marketing department. "Louisa, I quit. But I still have an old communication strategy draft that says, avoid using Emily's image in any public-facing materials. It does not align with the current branding direction. Want it?" I replied, "Yes, send me everything." The next day, I sat in a small coffee shop in Hoboken, reviewing every line of the documents. Each word was a pair of shears, cutting me off from inheritance, from family, from identity. But this time, I was the one holding the scissors. The trial began on a freezing October morning. The Hudson County Courthouse wasn't grand like old carpeted hallways. Flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of damp paperwork mixed with cheap coffee. But to me, this place was a battlefield. And for the first time in my life, I was here to defend. I was here to end it. I sat next to David, my attorney. He flipped through the files, checking each tab, each seal, like a conductor preparing for the crescendo. Across from us, my mother, Angela Walker, wore a cream-colored suit, trying to appear composed. My father kept his head down, eyes vacant. And Madeline? Didn't look at anyone. She played with her phone as if this hearing were just a rescheduled manicure appointment. The judge was a woman in her early 50s, face stern, voice hard as concrete. She had no patience for manipulation. I knew, today, the only thing that mattered in this room was the truth. David stood first. Your Honor, we request that the following documents be entered into the record. The original will, drafted by Mr. Gregory Walker, property transfer documents with evidence of forgery, an audio recording in which the defendant admits to excluding the plaintiff for image reasons, and internal emails that demonstrate a coordinated effort to deprive my client, Emily Walker, of her legal ownership. The judge nodded. Accepted. Proceed. David presented the will, the same one I had preserved like a sacred artifact. This document, Your Honor, was notarized by an independent attorney, filed while Mr. Gregory Walker was alive, and was never legally revoked or replaced. It clearly assigns full ownership of the Cape May property to Emily Walker. No objections. The judge flipped through each page, then asked, does the defense have any evidence that contradicts the legal validity of this will? My mother's attorney, a gray-haired man named Mathers, stood hesitantly. We do not have another original document, but we believe this will may not reflect the decedent's final intent. Intent is not the law, Mr. Mathers. Ink on paper is, the judge interrupted, voice as sharp as a hammer. The courtroom froze. I could hear my mother's breath grow heavier. Madeline finally looked up, frowning at me. David continued. He played the recording where my mother spoke about removing me from the family image, because I didn't fit the brand. Her voice echoed through the courtroom, cold, calculated, unmistakable. She doesn't fit the story we're telling. We need consistency. We need a clean image. A second later, my father's voice followed. Just make sure Emily doesn't find out before it's done. She's too soft, she won't do anything. The judge looked toward the defense. Mrs. Angela Walker, do you deny that the voice in this recording is yours? My mother said nothing. Her hands clenched tightly, knuckles turning white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. David placed the final document on the table, property transfer paperwork, with the forged signature, and the notary seal from Savannah Doyle. Emily's signature was forged. A comparison with her verified legal documents shows clear discrepancies, and the use of a family member as the notary further proves a deliberate pattern of deception. The judge struck her gavel. I've heard enough. She flipped through the case file one last time, silently, for what felt like an eternity. This court rules that the property in Cape May, New Jersey, per the valid will, shall be returned to the rightful owner, Emily Grace Walker. I inhaled sharply. My whole body felt like it had escaped a chokehold. Furthermore, the Walker Initiative's financial operations will be frozen for 90 days to allow for a full administrative and tax investigation by the Office of the State Comptroller. A loud "no" rang out. My mother stood. This is a setup. She's destroying this family over one meaningless house. I stood too, facing her, my voice calm as a lake after a storm. This isn't about a house. It's about the fact that you thought I was worth nothing. Madeline whispered something to her lawyer, then walked out of the courtroom without a word. I didn't look back, I looked forward. The judge closed the hearing with one sentence. Justice is not about satisfying emotions. It is about restoring what is right. Court is adjourned. I stepped outside with David, the midday sun hitting my face. It was blinding. But I didn't shield my eyes. For the first time in 27 years, I walked without the shadow of my family behind me. I didn't need their acknowledgement anymore. I had the truth. And this time I held it in my hands. No one could take it away. 6 months after the trial, I stood barefoot in the living room of the Cape May house, my feet touching the newly polished hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted beige walls. The house they had once erased from me no longer felt like a legal trophy. It was a beginning. I didn't choose to destroy it, as many had suggested. I didn't turn it into a personal retreat, like Madeline did for her extravagant 30th birthday party. Instead, I chose to give it back to those who had also been erased like I was. I used part of the restored funds from the lawsuit to transform the house into the Lighthouse Project, a creative and healing center for women who had grown up in the foster care system. Women who had been lost in temporary shelters, evaluation reports, and the pitying eyes of society. Women like me who hadn't shared the same background, but carried the same feeling of being excluded from the one place that was supposed to be home. No flashy signs, no loud media coverage, just a small wooden plaque hanging at the gate. We see you, and you don't have to be perfect to belong. The first group had only 4 residents. They arrived with small suitcases, guarded expressions, and an energy like they were bracing for interrogation. But after a few weeks, I heard them laughing. I saw them paint, write, cook. The house began to breathe. One evening, I sat in the kitchen with Raina, a 24-year-old who had cycled through 3 failed adoptive homes. She folded a stack of sketch papers and said, "Emily, I never thought I'd feel at peace like this." I looked at her, my heart both heavy and light. I never thought I'd believe in that feeling again either. But it's real. It starts when you stop asking permission to exist. I didn't tell the girls about the trial, about my mother, about Madeline. I didn't need that story to define me anymore. A week after the lighthouse opened, I received a thin envelope, no sender name. The handwriting on the front was slanted, sharp but hesitant. I knew immediately who it was from. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper with 12 handwritten words. I was wrong. I'm sorry it took so long to see it. No signature, but I didn't need it. Madeline. I sat on the wooden chair by the window, looking out to the backyard, where the girls were hanging up their paintings on a clothesline. The letter rested in my hand, so light it felt like it might vanish if I held it too tightly. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relieved. I folded it gently, placed it in a small box, along with the guest tag from that graduation day, and a copy of the judge's ruling. Not to remember the pain, but to remind myself that I survived. I rose, and I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. My mother never reached out again. My father disappeared from the media after the foundation was frozen. I heard through whispers they were trying to rebuild from the ruins. But this time, without the protection of reputation. And me? I started hosting anonymous writing circles. A group of women would gather each week in Cape May, sitting around a long wooden table, sharing passages they had never dared read aloud. Memories, silences forced upon them, and anger they had never been allowed to release. I didn't say much, I just listened. One day, a girl named Marley, 19, unhoused since she was 14, handed me a folded note and whispered, "I wrote this about you." I opened it. The first line read, "She didn't need to scream to be heard. She chose to stand when the world told her to sit. And because of that, I believe I can stand too." I bit my lip. My eyes burned, but not from pain, from the quiet, steady truth that I had built something real, not a monument of revenge, but a place to begin again. I stepped outside to the porch. The Cape May evening sky was stained orange and red. The sea breeze swept in salty and cool, carrying the scent of fresh wood, paint, and hope. I looked at the house once more. No longer a place of pain. No longer a courtroom victory. Now it was home. But this time, a home for those who never had a place to belong. And I, Emily Grace Walker, no longer needed to be accepted. I had built a world of my own, from the ashes of everything that once tried to burn me down. My story isn't about a lawsuit. It's not even about reclaiming a house. It's about reclaiming myself, after being ruthlessly erased by my own family. I've learned that not everyone born into your life deserves to be called family. And sometimes healing begins the moment you stop hoping they'll change. Forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of old wounds. Today, I don't need their recognition. I have myself. And that is enough. What do you think of Emily's choice? Was she right to let go of the past to build her own future? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.
I'm Morgan, 33 years old, working in finance in Denver, Colorado. People usually assume the eldest child is serious, quiet, maybe a little cold. As for me, I was defined by just 3 words: the one who carries. Since childhood, I got used to staying in the background and handling everything. Cleaning up after my sister's birthday parties, helping her with math homework late at night, canceling plans with friends just to pick her up from art class. Her name is Hannah, 4 years younger than me, always full of energy and the center of attention, especially for our mother, Sherelle. Even when I earned a scholarship to a state university, Mom barely nodded. Well, that's Morgan. She always does the right thing. But when Hannah got into a private art school with sky-high tuition, Mom screamed in the living room, "My daughter is so talented. I told you, Hannah brings color into this house." I remember that moment vividly, me standing there holding my semester budget spreadsheet while Mom hugged my sister like she just won a Grammy. My father, Ronald, was never one to speak up. He's gentle, calm, and always chose to step back when Mom made decisions. He could cook a lovely dinner for the whole family, but couldn't find the words to defend me when Mom criticized me in front of relatives. As a kid, I used to think, maybe it's because I'm the oldest. I have to sacrifice. But after decades, that excuse became just a shield for people to avoid responsibility and exploit my silence. Whenever Hannah messed up, Mom turned to me. "Morgan, you're the older sister. You should understand her. Give in to her." Whenever the family faced financial trouble, she'd say, "You have a good job. Helping out a little won't hurt." And when I was hurting, no one asked. No one paused to listen. I still remember the time I broke up with my long-term boyfriend, the one I thought I'd marry. I drove 3 hours home, hoping one hug from my mother would be enough. But when I walked through the door, she barely looked up and asked, "Where's Hannah? Didn't she come with you?" So I wanted to scream, "I'm the one who just got betrayed. Do you even care?" But I said nothing. I walked to my room, shut the door, and for the first time, felt completely alone in my own family. Hannah was different. One text from her and Mom would leave a pot boiling on the stove just to be with her. She could forget to pay tuition and still get praised. She's an artist. Having financial sense is rare in creatives. I used to think time and maturity would bridge the gap between me and Mom. I was wrong. When Hannah graduated, Mom threw a grand party at a hotel, hired a professional photographer and a live band. When I got promoted to regional director, she said over the phone, "Wow, that title sounds big. Don't forget to take your dad and me for our checkups, okay?" No congratulations, no cake, just another task. I don't know what feels worse, being invisible or only being seen when someone needs something from me. Either way, I'd gotten used to it. And I thought that was the extent of it. Until Hannah's wedding was announced. Hannah got engaged on a June afternoon, right after her first art exhibit at a small gallery in Boulder. When I walked into the room, the diamond ring was already shining on her finger and her eyes sparkled with joy. And proposed right after it ended. "Morgan, I can't believe it. I'm getting married." Hannah hugged me tightly, swaying with excitement. Surprised but genuinely happy, I smiled. So my little sister's going to be a bride. Who's the maid of honor? You, of course. I can't do this without you. I hugged her back, thinking that maybe this time I'd finally be given a meaningful role, not out of obligation, but because I was chosen, because of love. In the following weeks, I threw myself into wedding planning like it was the biggest project of my life. I built a budget spreadsheet, mapped out every detail from floral arrangements to appetizer menus. We spent hours in my apartment sipping red wine and flipping through bridal catalogs, giggling like we were kids again. Which color palette do you like better, dusty rose or emerald green? Dusty rose, she said. Softer. Great, I'll book sample fittings at both of your favorite shops. Don't worry, I'll cover the cost. Hannah nodded. I'm so lucky to have you. That sentence kept me warm for weeks. I wired a $3,000 deposit to the photographer she adored, even though Mom disapproved. What a waste. My friend can take decent pictures, she scoffed. I hired a team to craft handmade invitations, another $1,200. But it was exactly the vintage style Hannah loved since she was a kid. I even brought in a private chef, someone who'd catered for a celebrity wedding in Aspen, just because Hannah once sighed, I want something truly unique, truly artistic. Every time I signed a check, I told myself, I'm doing this for Hannah, no one else. Then I decided on the ultimate wedding gift, a honeymoon in Santorini. I booked a boutique hotel with ocean views, a private pool, and nightly Greek cooking classes. First-class round-trip tickets, private transportation. I spent over $9,000. I wanted her to start her marriage with the kind of beauty and peace I had never been given. No one asked me to pay. I didn't want a flashy thank you. Just Hannah's smile was enough. Still, there were small signs that gave me pause, but I brushed them off. Once, I suggested hosting the bridal shower at a garden venue in town. Mom cut me off sharply. Too windy and expensive. Why must you always aim for luxury? Let me ask my friend. She planned a party for the mayor's son. I looked at Hannah, hoping she'd speak up. She only smiled weakly. It's okay, sis. Let Mom help a bit. Another time, I stumbled on a Facebook group chat called Team Bride. Mom, our cousin Rachel, some of Hannah's close friends were in it. I wasn't. When I asked, Hannah shrugged. Oh, it's just small stuff. You've been busy. Do you want me to stop helping? I asked quietly. Don't say that. I need you, but some people think you're a little intense. You understand, right? I nodded, but something quietly cracked inside me. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive, that wedding stress was making everyone snappy. What I didn't know was that those cracks were the beginning of something far more deliberate, an orchestrated collapse that everyone knew about, except me. Everything started to go off track on a Saturday morning when I got a short text from Hannah. Mom booked the church. It's gorgeous. You don't have to worry anymore. I froze. Touring churches had been the plan Hannah and I set for the coming weekend. I had even scheduled visits at 3 different locations around the city. I called her. She picked up after 3 rings, her voice both groggy and awkward. Mom really likes that church. It's close to home, and she knows the pastor. I thought it wouldn't hurt to let her take care of it, right? I smiled faintly, though a storm was already rising inside me. I thought this was your wedding, not Mom's. Silence. Then Hannah mumbled, You know how Mom is. Sometimes it's just easier to let her handle things. Easier for who? I didn't ask. From that point on, everything started slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. I wasn't told about the cake tasting, despite being the one who had sent Hannah a curated list of Denver's top bakeries. Photos of her and Mom smiling beside a 3-tier ivory cake showed up on Facebook with the caption, Love is when your mom picks the perfect flavor. It stung like a slap across the face. Suddenly, Rachel, my cousin, began showing up in every behind-the-scenes wedding picture. From dress fittings to meetings with the planner, there she was beside Hannah, arm in arm, beaming. I didn't even know when those meetings happened. No one had sent me any schedules. One day, I caught an Instagram story, Hannah, Rachel, and Mom trying on bridesmaid dresses at a fancy boutique. I texted Hannah, "I thought you wanted me to come dress shopping with you." 2 hours later, she replied, "Sorry, sis, Mom booked it last minute since Rachel's heading back to Arizona next week. We'll go together next fitting, I promise." That next fitting never happened. Every time I brought up my role, stationery design, music selection, seating charts, Mom had a way of brushing me off. "Let Rachel take care of that, you're busy." Or, "I already handled that, no need to trouble yourself." Or worse, "Morgan, just handling the finances is more than enough. Don't try to do everything. People might think you're the bride." I had never seen someone turn rejection into such a sweet-sounding favor. I thought Hannah would see what was happening, but she never said anything. She never took my side. Not once did she push back on Mom. One afternoon, during our usual lunch at the Blue Hen, a mother-daughter tradition, Mom said bluntly, "You should let Rachel be the maid of honor. You might be hardworking, but you don't understand aesthetics. Hannah needs someone more refined and less intense." I set my spoon down. Fury crawled through my fingers like fire. "Excuse me? I'm just being honest. You micromanage too much. This is Hannah's day, not yours. Maybe you should learn to step back." Step back? After spending over $13,000? After sleepless nights budgeting and organizing? I stood up and walked away, leaving my soup untouched. I said nothing because I knew if I opened my mouth, everything would explode right then and there. And I wasn't ready to lose my sister. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at the wedding spreadsheet on Google Sheets. Venue deposit, $4,000. Dations, $1,100. Photographer's deposit, $2,750. Unannounced honeymoon deposit, $5,000. Nearly $13,000 in total, not including hundreds of hours of work or the pride I'd been slowly giving up. And still, I kept paying. Because deep down, I thought that maybe after the wedding, things would go back to how they used to be. Maybe Hannah would hug me and say, "You've always been the most important person in my life." I still had hope. I received an invitation to a family dinner on a Thursday evening, just weeks before Hannah's wedding. The text from Mom was short. "Everyone's gathering to finalize wedding matters. Be there by 7 sharp, don't be late." Tyler, my boyfriend, looked up from the kitchen counter as I read it. "Are you sure you want to go? Lately, they've been treating you like an outsider." I nodded, forcing a smile. Maybe they realized things went too far. Maybe this is their way of making it right. But deep down, I already knew. When I arrived, my parents' house in Lakewood looked as peaceful as ever. White painted porch, rows of pine trees lining the walkway, warm golden light spilling from the kitchen windows. Everything was so painfully familiar. Mom opened the door with a stiff smile. "Come in, everyone's waiting." The living room smelled overly perfumed and unnervingly quiet. My dad sat hunched in his recliner, gripping his tea like it was an anchor. Hannah sat beside Rachel on the long couch, avoiding my eyes. And Megan, yes, Megan, was planted in the middle seat where I used to sit, wearing a faint, smug smile. I stood. No one offered me a chair. "Morgan, we need to clarify a few things," Mom began in that flat, practiced tone I'd known since childhood, the voice of decisions already made. I looked at Hannah, hoping she'd say something, but she only looked down. "Here's the thing," Mom continued. "Everyone feels like your presence during the wedding planning has been stressful." I frowned. "Stressful? You always try to control everything, the guest list, the flowers, even the ceremony music. It's made people uncomfortable." "Who are people?" I looked around the room. No one answered. "We've had separate discussions. With Hannah, Rachel, your father," she said, lowering her voice. "And everyone agreed, it's best if you don't attend the wedding." I thought I misheard. "What did you say?" "You're not going to be a bridesmaid, and your name's not on the guest list." Dad shifted like he wanted to say something, but Mom cut in. "Ronald, don't complicate this." I turned to Hannah. "You staying silent means you agree with them?" My sister looked up, eyes red. You're always so intense. I just want a peaceful wedding. I scoffed, not because it was funny, but because there was nothing left to say. Peaceful? So cutting me out entirely is the best way? Megan pressed her lips together, eyes daring me to argue. I turned to Mom. Do you even know how much I've spent on this wedding? Morgan, she interrupted. Money doesn't buy the right to manipulate people's emotions. And it doesn't guarantee you a place at every important event. Dad looked at me with quiet pleading, choosing silence again. I took a deep breath and stood taller. Fine, if this is your decision, I'll respect it, but don't expect me to keep supporting things behind the scenes like before. Mom gave a thin smile. No one's asking you to. I nodded, turned, and walked out of the room I once called family. No one followed, no one called after me. By the time I closed my car door, my hands were shaking, my whole body numb with shock. I don't remember the drive home, but Tyler was waiting on the steps, and the second he saw me, he knew. They shut me out. My voice didn't sound like my own. No, he said quietly. You stepped out, and that was the right thing to do. I sat on the kitchen floor, the cold wood grounding me like nothing else. This wasn't a misunderstanding, not wedding stress. They knew exactly what they were doing. And from this moment on, so did I. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a mind still spiraling from the fall. Tyler was still asleep, his hand gently resting on my shoulder, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. But no one else could do what I needed to do next. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. The kitchen light was still off, just a dim glow from the gray Colorado sky leaking through the windows. First order of business, I reopened my bank account. The $5,000 payment for the honeymoon hotel in Santorini? Canceled. The business class flight? Contacted the airline. I got a partial refund just over $3,200. I quietly logged each detail. Santorini Suites. Canceled 6 nights, $5,000. Aegean Airlines, round-trip tickets canceled, $3,200. Private cooking class plus sunset cruise, refunded $750. And I sent a short email to the travel agent. The honeymoon trip is no longer needed. Please cancel all related services and send refund confirmations. Next, I opened the wedding expense spreadsheet, the one I created, the one that now no longer belonged in my life. Photographer paid $2,750. Invitations and design, $1,100. Welcome baskets for out-of-state guests, $1,400. Private tasting session, $2,000. Total, nearly $15,000 for a wedding I was no longer welcome at. It wasn't the money I mourned. It was myself. I opened my credit card app and changed the access setting to account holder only. No more mom, no more family charges I had recently found out were made without my consent. I found a charge labeled premium linens for reception for $780, charged to my card. I had never been asked. I filed a claim with the credit card company for unauthorized transaction. System response: your request is being processed. Then I sent a single message in the family group chat, the one I had never left, hoping someday things would get better. Morgan, I've withdrawn all wedding support. Payments, accounts, and credit cards have been canceled or reversed. Please don't try to reach out. I need space to protect myself. I hope that's respected. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. Mom, calling, lit up the screen. I didn't answer. 3 more calls from Hannah. 1 from Dad. Then the texts started flooding in. Cheryl, Mom, you're being petty and childish. After all these years of caring for you, now you turn your back just because of a little feedback? Hannah, what are you doing? This is the most important day of my life. You can't ruin it just because you're hurt. Ronald, Dad. Morgan, I know you're upset, but we can fix this. Don't make things worse. Worse? I had been cast out of their lives like a stranger, and now I was the one destroying everything? Tyler walked out, looked at me squarely. They're trying to pull you back into their cycle again, aren't they? I nodded slightly. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Not reacting is sometimes the strongest reaction. I stayed silent, and for the first time, I let go, not in defeat, but in clarity. That afternoon, I pulled every wedding document out of the drawer. Receipts, table layouts, flower palettes, the leather notebook Hannah gave me when we first started, its cover embossed. The best maid of honor ever. I boxed it all up, sealed it with tape, and labeled it. No longer mine. I placed the box under the stairs, not to keep it, but to mark that I had left it behind, for good. 3 days after I withdrew all my support for the wedding, my phone rang at 7 a.m., a time usually reserved for emergencies or board meetings. The caller ID read, Andrew, Hannah's fiancé. His voice was urgent. Morgan, I know you don't want to talk to anyone right now, but this is important. You need to hear this. I paused. You've got 2 minutes. Last night, I found something on Hannah's phone. Messages between you and her. Something's off. What do you mean? Here, texts from you that don't sound like you, and when I checked your settings, I found a strange number saved under your name. My whole body went cold. You're saying my mother changed Hannah's contacts? Not just that. I think she's been sending fake messages from a different number, making Hannah believe you refused every invitation and even insulted her. I snapped open my laptop the second we hung up. I gathered every backup, emails, receipts, screenshots of payments I'd sent Hannah. I compiled them into a single PDF file titled The Truth. That afternoon, I walked into a small cafe in downtown Denver, one Hannah and I used to frequent. But this time, it wasn't Mom sitting beside her. It was Andrew, his face drawn and tense. Hannah froze when she saw me. Her eyes were swollen, 2 untouched cappuccinos sat on the table. She spoke barely above a whisper, like saying my name too loud might scare me away. Morgan, I didn't know. I opened my laptop, turned the screen toward her, and said quietly but firmly, It's okay, but you need to look. I scrolled through booking emails, payment confirmations, real text threads between us, the ones I actually sent, the ones she never received. Andrew picked up Hannah's phone and opened her messaging app. Here, he said, pointing at her contacts. This number is saved as Morgan, but it's not yours. The messages from it are cold, dismissive, even slightly insulting. I think your mom created it. Hannah didn't say anything. She just lowered her head, tears falling freely. I continued, pulling up my detailed wedding budget. Here's my bank statement. Every expense, every deposit, even the honeymoon I canceled. Anna's hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the table. I didn't know. I thought you just pulled away, that you believed I didn't deserve your support. Andrew cleared his throat, his voice cracking. Last night your mom came over, said Morgan was trying to ruin everything, but something didn't feel right. I checked the text history. At least 3 messages were deleted. Real ones from Morgan, replaced with those fakes. I looked Hannah in the eyes. And you didn't find it strange when I suddenly disappeared? When the person who spent months helping you plan got pushed out like a stranger? Hannah sobbed. I did. But every time I questioned it, Mom had a reason. She showed me proof. Screenshots. I thought they were real, I swear. I didn't respond right away. Outside the window, the first snow of the season had begun to fall, and inside me, something also melted, like the final layer of frost between me and my sister. Andrew gently held Hannah's hand. We have to confront her. We can't let this go on. Morgan's been through enough. I closed my laptop. I don't need revenge. I just need the truth. If you want to rebuild this, start from there. Hannah nodded, her eyes bloodshot but steady. I do, and I won't let her destroy this again. We sat there for a while longer, saying nothing. But for the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't distance. It was a beginning. The family meeting took place on a Sunday afternoon at Aunt Linda's house, my dad's younger sister, and the only person in our family who had ever dared to confront my mother without fear of consequence. The usually cozy living room felt unbearably heavy, as if everyone could sense something irreversible was about to unfold. I sat beside Hannah, with Andrew next to her. My father, Ronald, was in the corner, more solemn than usual. Rachel had been invited, but claimed she had work and didn't show up. My mother, Cheryl, walked in last, clutching her leather handbag and wearing a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I heard there's something to clear up. Hopefully this isn't another performance, she said, taking a seat across from me like it was a courtroom. I didn't respond. I just opened my laptop and placed it in front of me. I'll get straight to the point, I said. Answered the record, showing you deliberately manipulated information, impersonated me, and sabotaged my relationship with Hannah. I mirrored the screen to the TV, showing screenshots of fake texts, messages my mother had sent from another number saved under my name. Messages she sent to Hannah for 3 whole months. Hannah's hands shook, but she spoke up. Mom, this is the message log. Andrew verified the number was altered in my contacts. You even deleted Morgan's real messages from my phone. My mother gave a familiar, condescending laugh. You kids are too sensitive. I just adjusted things a little to protect Hannah. Adjusted? I frowned. You made my sister think I looked down on her, refused to help her, and deliberately tried to hurt her? I did what I did for your own good. Morgan, you always control everything. Hannah needed space. Andrew cut in, his voice firmer than I'd ever heard. No one needs space built on lies and manipulation. You didn't just damage their bond, you nearly turned the wedding into a charade. Cheryl went silent for a beat. Then, as I predicted, she entered phase 2. Angry, ungrateful, the lot of you. Everything I've done was for this family. Morgan, without me, what foundation would you even have to stand on today? I kept my voice unsettlingly calm. You can't guilt me anymore. I've lost too much staying silent just to be a good daughter. That ends now. My father exhaled. Cheryl, I've stayed quiet too long, but what Morgan's shown us, I can't ignore it. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for support. No one spoke. Aunt Linda stood with her arms folded, expression like steel. Then came the final act, tears. I'm just a mother who wants her children happy. How could you all turn on me like this? She said, wiping her face. Morgan, we share blood. How can you humiliate your own mother in front of the family? Anna gripped my hand. No one's humiliating you. We're speaking the truth and setting boundaries. Andrew added firmly. If you can't respect those boundaries, no more control, no more lies, no more sabotage, then you won't be part of the wedding. The room fell silent. Cheryl looked as though someone had punched the last of her pride. You're choosing her over me? She asked Hannah, voice cracking. Hannah replied, calm and clear. I'm choosing truth over manipulation. I'm choosing to build my own future, not be ruled by twisted memories. Aunt Linda stood. This meeting wasn't to gang up on anyone. It was to end a pattern of pain that's gone on too long. If nothing else changes, then at least let it stop. We didn't expect instant repentance, but the simple act of naming the truth out loud in front of everyone was our first taste of freedom. My mother left without another word, and when the door shut behind her, it felt as though the air had been cleared of poison. I turned to Hannah. She squeezed my hand tightly, eyes shining. I owe you an apology and a promise. From now on, we stand together. I gently squeezed back. That's the promise I've always been waiting for. 2 weeks after the family confrontation, I got a text from Hannah. If you're willing, I want you to be my bridesmaid again, not out of duty, but because I truly need you there. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I replied, I'll do it, but this time on clear terms. We met at a small cafe on Colfax, the same place we used to plan family trips years ago. I didn't beat around the bush. I'll help you, but I'm not going back to being the unpaid coordinator. I'll participate, but only at a healthy level. I'm not the dumping ground for pressure anymore. Hannah nodded. No deflection, no vague apologies this time. I get it, and I respect that. We hugged. No more words were needed. Some cracks don't disappear, but they can heal if both sides want healing. Over the next weeks, I helped coordinate the bridesmaids, picked new dresses, this time chosen by Hannah herself. I stayed out of vendor emails, budgeting, and there was no fronting the costs and sorting it later. Dad quietly supported us both. He showed up to every rehearsal, silent but steady. As for Mom, after that meeting, she no longer acted like the director of the event. No one forced her to change, but with pressure from Aunt Linda and Andrew, she finally started seeing a therapist. She hasn't apologized, but she's kept her distance. And for me, a boundary respected is often more valuable than a forced apology. The wedding day came with a quiet blue sky and gentle sun. Hannah walked out in a pure white lace gown, holding lavender, smiling at me in the mirror as I fixed her veil. "You know what I used to fear most?" she asked, eyes glistening. "That I wouldn't be here anymore?" She nodded. "But now I know that fear wasn't about losing you. It was about how I let others pull me away from you." I gently squeezed her hand and whispered, "We still have years to make it right." The ceremony unfolded under golden evening light, no drama, no interruptions. Mom sat quietly in the second row, just a guest. She didn't interfere, didn't try to hijack speeches, didn't steal anyone's spotlight. Hannah cried reading her vows. Andrew's hands shook placing the ring. And I stood there, not as the scapegoat, not the outsider, but as a sister, in the truest sense. After the wedding, we didn't return to how things were. But what we have now is a bond built on truth, healthy boundaries, and the deliberate choice to hold on. The following summer, Hannah gave birth to her first daughter. When I visited, she placed the baby in my arms. Guess her name? I looked at the baby, gray, new eyes like Hannah, high forehead like Andrew. Don't tell me. Her middle name is Morgan. Because if she ever needs an example of strength and self-respect, I want her to look at that name first. I couldn't hold back my tears. That same year, Tyler proposed to me on a trip to Oregon. No roses, no candles. Just a simple question after a hike. Are you ready to start a new chapter, where you finally put yourself first? I nodded. We held a small engagement party, just close friends and the people who truly mattered. Mom wasn't invited, not out of spite, but because I've learned, blood doesn't entitle anyone to a place in your life. Who we allow in, that is our choice. And this time, I chose me. Chose love that doesn't cost my peace. Chose family, but not at the cost of myself. Morgan's story is a powerful reminder that family bonds can't survive without honesty and respect. In real life, some of the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from emotional manipulation within our own bloodlines. But like Morgan, you have every right to set boundaries, protect your worth, and choose relationships that truly honor you. Blood does not give anyone the right to cause harm. And sometimes walking away from the role of the fixer is the first real step toward freedom. What do you think about Morgan's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, truth, and courage in everyday life. My name is Melanie Carter. At 16, I knew one thing for certain. In my parents' eyes, I was the backup plan. My family lived in a small town in Oregon, where every house had a chimney, a white picket fence, and a front lawn trimmed like it was ready for a home and garden magazine. To outsiders, we looked like the perfect middle-class family. My dad, Alan Carter, was a credit officer at a local bank, and my mom, Rachel, taught high school English. But that stability was just surface level. Inside that house was a hierarchy I never qualified to climb. I had a younger sister named Claire, 2 years younger than me, with soft blonde curls, a bright smile, and the kind of charm that made adults melt with just a glance. To my parents, Claire was a living Christmas card, adorable, accomplished, and worth investing in. And me? I was the shadow, the kid who got good grades but was expected to figure it out, the one who earned a half-hearted, "that's great," while they were already focused on the next conversation. I still remember Christmas mornings vividly, Claire unwrapping flashy gifts, a new Polaroid camera, a set of high-end makeup brushes, wireless earbuds, and me, I'd get a notebook, a clearance rack sweater, or a gift card with a sticky note. Pick something you like. Once, I asked my mom why the difference was so obvious. She smiled and said, "You don't need as much. Claire needs encouragement to shine." Those words stuck with me like a smudged pen line on paper, impossible to erase. At school, I worked hard and joined every club related to science, math, and business. But not once did my parents come to see my presentations or exhibitions. Meanwhile, Claire only had to build a baking soda volcano, and both parents would take the day off to cheer her on. "Melanie, art is just a hobby, not a career," my dad once said when I got accepted into a summer design camp on a scholarship I earned myself. I used to think maybe I was imagining it, that I was being too sensitive, but one day, standing by the stairs, I overheard my mom talking to my dad in the kitchen. "Claire's the one with real potential. Melanie's too closed off, too stubborn. You just can't expect much." I stood frozen, letting the cold truth of that sentence sink into every bone in my body. From that day forward, I stopped waiting. I didn't wait to be picked up, didn't wait for anyone to ask how my day was. I learned to walk to the library alone, cook my own dinners, and remind myself through scribbled notes in my journal, "Don't wait for validation, prove it to yourself." The only people who truly saw me were my grandmother Margaret and my economics teacher Miss Turner, but they lived on the edges of my world. Grandma was too frail, and Miss Turner's support ended with the school bell. In my house, the unspoken law had long been established. Claire was the future. I was the one who figured things out alone. But from that quiet injustice, something unshakable began to grow. If no one believed I was worth investing in, I'd make them see it. Not by shouting, but by achieving something they couldn't ignore. I got into Columbia University when I was 17. So did Claire. I remember clearly the day the acceptance letters arrived. 2 thick envelopes, identical on the outside, but the way they were received couldn't have been more different. I opened mine with shaking hands, reading and rereading the first few lines until the words blurred. "Congratulations, Melanie Carter." I screamed in the kitchen, unable to hide my excitement. "I got in!" I announced, hoping for even a flicker of pride. Dad looked up from his phone. "Really? Claire applied there too." Right then, Claire walked in holding her envelope, and before she could even open it, Mom pulled her into a tight hug. "I knew it! You're the family's brightest hope," she beamed, eyes glistening. I stood beside them, still holding my acceptance letter, as if it were just a side note. When I said, "I got into Columbia too, business management program," Mom replied flatly, "Good to know." No hug, no celebratory lemonade, not even a nod of approval. The moment Claire read the word scholarship in her letter, Dad pulled her to the table. "We need to plan. Columbia isn't cheap." I sat down and, mustering all my courage, said, "I'd like to talk about how I'll cover tuition, too." Dad paused. His eyes weren't angry or cold, just empty. Mom set her spoon down and said a sentence I still can't forget. "Melanie, we only have enough for one of you. Claire fits that environment better. You're stronger, more independent. You've always managed, haven't you?" I thought I'd misheard. I asked again, voice nearly cracking. "You mean there's no support for me?" Dad nodded. "We're not financially flexible. Claire has the potential to make a big impact. You're capable, but your future isn't as clear. Investing in Claire is the safer bet." Safer bet? I said nothing more. I quietly left the table, went upstairs, locked my door, and let the ache rise like a storm surge. I had grown up swallowing anger, tucking away disappointment, stepping aside for Claire at every turn. But this time, I couldn't swallow it. Not when everything I had worked for, a 4 GPA, a state-level business award, 2 years working in a bakery, was brushed aside. That night, I heard the sound of clinking glasses downstairs. Music, laughter. They popped champagne for Claire. No one knocked on my door. I opened my laptop, searched for scholarships, and typed again and again. Columbia plus, need-based plus, emergency plus first generation. One sentence looped in my mind. If they won't bet on me, I'll invest in myself. 3 days later, while washing dishes in the morning, Mom handed me a folder. These are some loan forms. There's also a brochure from the local community college. If Columbia doesn't work out, this might be more reasonable. I dried my hands, took the folder, and calmly set it in the sink. I'm going to Columbia, I said, my voice steady and ice cold. And I won't need a single dollar from this family. Mom looked stunned. Maybe for the first time, she saw me not as compliant or quiet, but firm. Melanie, don't be stubborn. This isn't stubbornness, this is clarity. I finally understand my place in this house. That night, I emailed my former college counselor, Mr. Jackson, who once encouraged me to join the summer startup competition. He replied within 20 minutes, setting up a meeting for Monday. The next day, I submitted 11 private scholarship applications, 4 supplemental financial aid forms, and created a detailed 4-year budget plan. Every time I typed in the tuition amount, I didn't feel fear, I felt fire rushing through my fingertips. The next morning, I took the earliest bus to Grandma Martha's house, the only person in the family who had ever seen me as an individual, not Claire's shadow. Her small wooden home on the outskirts of Eugene had a weathered blue porch roof, the faint smell of apple pie in the air, and bookshelves packed with worn novels. It was the one place I never had to perform to be seen. She was watering plants when I arrived. As soon as she saw me, without a single question, she opened her arms and held me tight. They've hurt you again, haven't they? She whispered into my ear. No blame, no need for details. She just understood, like always. That evening, I told her everything. The acceptance letter, Dad's cold words, Claire is the safer investment. She was silent for a long time before resting her hand on mine. Her gaze was calm but razor sharp. Melanie, she said, just because they don't believe in you doesn't mean you're unworthy. You have to go. Even if it means working 3 jobs, even if it means eating dry bread for a month, go. Show the world they were wrong. I nodded. Not for comfort, but because I knew she was right. Over the next 2 months, I turned her living room into my personal survival headquarters. I compiled scholarship lists, filled out dozens of aid forms, wrote letters to local foundations, even reached out to alumni associations. I knew I had little time. The fall term at Bradley West would begin at the end of August. Eventually, I secured 3 small scholarships totaling more than $4,500. Not enough for the full first year, but enough to place a deposit and confirm enrollment. The rest came from federal student aid and a private loan co-signed by Grandma Martha. I rented a small room in an old house nearly an hour from campus by bus. 3 other students lived there, each juggling jobs with no time for parties. My room was tiny, with a cracked ceiling and a leaky window during rain, but to me, it was a beginning. I landed a job at a coffee bakery near the bus stop, working the early shift from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. After class, I worked part-time at a used bookstore downtown, where the owner, Mrs. June, let me read for free when it was quiet. My course load was packed: 4 economics classes, 1 in data analysis, and a Thursday night startup seminar. I carried cold lunches in a tote bag, studied on the bus, and replayed lectures while washing mugs. I didn't have a single spare minute to be tired. But I kept a 4 GPA all year, not because I was smarter, but because I had no other choice. Professor Mendez, who taught strategic thinking, noticed me after I presented an idea using consumer behavior data to predict profit trends for small shops. After class, he asked me to stay behind. Have you ever run a business before? He asked. I smiled. No. But I've had to calculate every dollar to survive a month. He nodded. Then you're in the right place. From that day on, I was invited to join his advanced research group alongside 3 upperclassmen. At first, they treated me like the girl with 2 jobs, but after a month, they began seeking my input before submitting reports. Around that time, Claire posted a photo online, posing in front of the university's main building, holding a pricey latte. The caption read, "Every day at Bradley is a chance to shine." Hundreds of likes followed, along with praises from friends, my mother, and extended family. Didn't hit the heart button. I didn't feel jealous. I just turned off my screen, poured a glass of cold tap water, and returned to revising the financial plan for my semester project. Sophomore year hit with a rhythm I had no choice but to master. Classes, jobs, and more classes. My bank account never crossed $200, but I held something no one could withdraw: sheer will. Every cent was tracked in my notebook. Essential coffee, $3.25. Laundry detergent, $6. Skipped chocolate bar, saved $1.79. I calculated I needed at least $824 a month just to survive, and I had to make that happen no matter what. Financial pressure pushed me to think like an entrepreneur. One late night while helping the bookstore owner balance her books, it hit me. So many local businesses had either no online presence or poorly built, outdated websites. What if I offered to build something simple for them, for a small fee? I created my first site using a free template, then walked to every nearby bakery, salon, and yoga studio, knocking on doors and leaving business cards I'd printed at the library. Within 3 weeks, I had my first 3 clients: a French bakery, a car repair shop, and a second-hand bookstore. I called my service Northlight Studio, a modest name, but professional enough. I redesigned logos, built Facebook pages, and taught owners how to post updates. Some paid in cash, others in trade, pastries, oil changes, or rare books. I accepted all forms of payment. Professor Mendez, the same one who once asked about my business experience, began to notice the change. After class one day, he approached me. "Melanie, you should consider scaling this. There's an annual competition, Western Collegiate Business Innovation Challenge. I want you to represent the department." I froze. It was a regional contest with a $50,000 startup grant. Nominees were usually honors students with glowing recommendations and polished pitches for real investors. "I've never pitched to anyone beyond my study group," I admitted. "Then it's time you start." For the next 3 months, I juggled jobs, school, and competition prep. I reworked financial models, sketched out marketing strategies, and built an expansion plan targeting smaller towns that couldn't afford big agencies. On pitch day, I wore a borrowed white blouse from the bookstore owner, old slacks from Goodwill, and a dab of Claire's perfume she had left behind during her visit. I stood in front of 5 judges, all seasoned investors, clicker trembling in my hand, but eyes locked on the screen. I spoke about the French bakery, how I helped them increase foot traffic through $15 a week Facebook ads. I described my third client, who had never used email before but now processed online orders thanks to a simple system I set up. When I finished, the room went quiet for 2 seconds. Then one judge, Angela Leng, the CEO of a media firm, nodded. "You have a grounded model, clear profit trajectory, and most importantly, drive rooted in lived experience. I respect that." 3 weeks later, an email arrived. Northlight Studio had won first place. I was awarded a symbolic check for $50,000 and a 1-year mentorship from top experts in digital marketing. From that moment, everything accelerated. The school newsletter ran a feature on me. Northlight Studio got a shout-out in the local paper. I received an email from a prominent San Francisco consulting firm, Brenner & Co., inviting me to interview. They said they heard about my story during an industry panel shared by one of the competition judges. 3 weeks after the interview, I got the offer. Market strategy analyst, starting salary $90,000 a year, plus bonuses and equity based on performance. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Claire. I simply sent Grandma Martha a photo, me in a gray suit, standing under the Brenner & Co. logo, holding a name badge that read, "Melanie Carter, Market Strategy Analyst." She replied with just 3 words. They were wrong. As I was revising the new development plan for Northlight Studio, my phone rang. It was Claire. We hadn't spoken directly in nearly 6 months. Our recent exchanges had been limited to emojis in the family group chat or vague messages like, "Busy?" followed by silence. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. Her voice came through, smaller and more unfamiliar than I remembered. "Are you free tonight?" "What's going on?" I asked, bluntly. "Me. I need help. I'm in trouble with my thesis." Claire was majoring in international relations, the same field our parents once hailed as worth investing our entire future in. And now she was coming to me, the one once deemed directionless and unstable. That evening, Claire showed up at my apartment for the first time in nearly 2 years. She wore an old hoodie, carrying her laptop and a messy pile of handwritten notes. No designer bag, no flawless makeup, just a tired, visibly uneasy Claire. My advisor said my thesis lacks analytical depth and has conflicting arguments. If I don't fix it in 2 weeks, I won't be allowed to graduate. I stayed silent, letting her speak, then I nodded gently. Sit down. Let's start with the outline. We worked until nearly 2 a.m. I helped her reorganize the logic in her introduction, corrected misformatted citations, and suggested ways to clarify her argument. The more we worked, the more I saw how much she lacked the basic learning and research skills I had sharpened over years of financial stress and self-reliance. When I handed her a cup of hot tea, Claire took it without looking at me. "Melanie," she whispered, "why don't you hate me?" The question made me pause. "I do," I said honestly, "but not because of you, because of everything they did that kept us from ever being real sisters." Claire was quiet. Then she looked up, eyes red. "I know. I took everything for granted. I thought you were okay. You always figured things out. But tonight, I get it. You weren't okay. You just had no choice." Didn't respond. I just handed her a document I'd prepared, a guide on argumentative writing and a list of credible academic sources. For the next 2 weeks, Claire returned to my place almost every night. We revised paragraph by paragraph, read through sources together, sometimes arguing over definitions, then laughing when we found her professor had misquoted a source. For the first time since we were kids, I felt we were no longer parallel lines. We were just two women, same age, equally exhausted, finally learning how to listen to each other. On the night she submitted her thesis, Claire stood at my door, not stepping in, and said, "I sent it. I cited you as my primary real-world case. I put your full name, Melanie Carter, founder of Northlight Studio." I blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she said, "because for the first time, I understand the value of what you've built, and I want others to see it too." Before leaving, she added, "Next week, I'm canceling the credit card they just sent. I want to know what it feels like to earn my own money." I laughed. "Careful. Earning your own money makes you not want to rely on anyone anymore." Claire shrugged. "Maybe that's what I need to learn." That night, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Not everyone born into the role of the chosen one realizes they've been standing on someone else's shoulders. But if they wake up in time, they can still make things right. And Claire, late as she was, chose to wake up, not out of guilt, but because she truly wanted to understand who I am. It wasn't redemption. It was a beginning. On the morning of graduation day, I woke up at 5 a.m., not out of anxiety, but because of a strange feeling. Peace. After 4 relentless years battling finances, dismissal, and loneliness, I had finally reached the finish line. And I wasn't arriving alone. Martha was waiting for me in the kitchen, holding a mug of hot coffee and the embroidered handkerchief she had kept for 30 years. "Don't carry anything heavy with you today," she said, "except your chin held high." I nodded, then hugged her tightly, pouring all my emotions into one silent gesture. Claire picked me up in her car. She wore a navy dress, her hair tied up high, her eyes sparkling with both nerves and pride. In her hands were 2 bouquets, one for me, one for Martha. "I reserved seats for Mom and Dad," Claire said as we got in. I stayed quiet. I hadn't forbidden it, but I hadn't invited them either. The main hall of Bradley West University was elegantly decorated, the school flag waved gently in the breeze, and rows of white chairs stretched out like the finish line of a marathon 10 years long. Graduates crowded the check-in area. I wore a black gown and cap draped with the silk stole Martha had sewn with silver thread. Survivor, strategist, self-made. Claire walked toward the guest section. I saw my parents sitting in the second row, next to aunts, uncles, and cousins. My mother wore a deep red dress, her lipstick perfectly matched. My father was in a gray suit, a blue tie. They looked like they were attending their daughter's award ceremony, but they had no idea who was about to be honored. When the dean stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "each year we choose one graduate who exemplifies resilience, leadership, and innovation. This year, that student is a business strategy major and the founder of Northlight Studio, Melanie Carter." Applause rolled like waves. I stood and walked to the stage under my parents' stunned gaze. My mother blinked repeatedly. My father leaned toward Claire, clearly asking, "Melanie?" I took the mic, stood tall, and drew a deep breath. "I came here 4 years ago with a loan, 2 part-time jobs, and a rejection from my own family," I began. "I had no farewell party, no fancy suitcase, no brand new laptop. But I had something else. The belief of people who didn't have to believe in me." I looked toward the guest section. Marta nodded, eyes glistening. Claire sat beside her, hand in hers. "I learned how to do more with less. I worked 16-hour days to stand here. And today I say this, not for revenge, but to prove what others once called weakness can become strength." The dean returned to the stage, placing his hand on my shoulder. "We are proud to announce a new scholarship, the Melanie Carter Resilience Grant, for students who overcome financial adversity to pursue education. This scholarship is funded by Northlight Studio in partnership with the Alumni Association." Hundreds rose in a standing ovation. I heard my mother's shock, not through her voice, but in the way she clutched her purse strap until her knuckles turned white. After the ceremony, I walked straight to my family. My father gave a stiff smile. "You did amazing. You should have told us." I cut in. "You never asked." And I've learned one thing. Delayed recognition means nothing to someone who's already proven themselves. Claire stepped up, linking arms with me. "We're heading to a party with Melanie's team. I'm going with her." My mother opened her mouth, but I had already turned away. Martha walked between us, her hand naturally slipping into mine, like it had when I was a child. As we stepped out of the university courtyard, I didn't feel relieved. I felt free. For the first time in my life. The summer after graduation, I moved to San Francisco and started my job at Brenner & Co., a market consulting firm I once believed was far out of reach, let alone attainable. I worked in the consumer strategy team, managing brand development projects for small businesses and nonprofits. The office sat on the 19th floor of a glass tower overlooking the bay. Every morning, as I stepped inside, I reminded myself, I didn't get here because someone opened a door. I climbed every step on my own. The Northlight Studio was still running, but I handed off operations to 2 underclassmen I had mentored. They continued expanding the client list, and I supported remotely, keeping the heart of the model alive while honoring the community that gave me my start. I used $15,000 from my first bonus at Brenner to formally launch the Northlight Scholarship Fund for freshmen from low-income backgrounds, with preference given to those balancing work and study. The scholarship offered more than money. It included one-on-one mentorship and a financial survival skills workshop, budgeting, finding part-time work, and reading loan agreements. I didn't want to help students merely survive college. I wanted them to live intentionally, with purpose. The first letter I received from a scholarship recipient brought tears to my eyes. "Dear Melanie, I never thought someone would believe I was worth investing in, but because of this scholarship, I won't have to drop out this semester. I won't let you down." I printed that letter and taped it beside my desk. 3 months after graduation, my parents emailed to ask for a meeting. For the first time in years, they didn't call unexpectedly or text through Claire. They wrote a long, formal, and awkward email. Subject line, about the things we never said clearly. They chose a quiet cafe in Oakland. I arrived on time, wearing a white blouse and black slacks, not to make a statement, but to show them. I was no longer the girl waiting to be acknowledged. My mother spoke first. "We said a lot of wrong things, Melanie, but the worst was what we never said. None of us ever said, "I'm sorry," and you never heard us say, "We were wrong." My father looked older. He spoke slowly, each word sliding past his pride. "I failed, not because I didn't help you, but because I didn't believe in you, and when you proved me wrong, I was too proud to admit it." I sat in silence. I wasn't there to watch them self-flagellate with guilt. I was there to set boundaries. "I don't need your forgiveness," I said calmly. "I need your respect, from now on, and for all time." My mother nodded. "We're ready to rebuild, from whatever foundation you choose." We started over like polite strangers, learning to speak kindly. No weekly calls, no emotional heart-to-hearts. But there was a seat reserved at the scholarship ceremony, flowers delivered to the office, a message from Claire. "Mom just asked how to use LinkedIn to follow your work." That was enough. I didn't ask for more. Every weekend, I still called Martha. Sometimes just to tell her I made lunch instead of ordering out. Sometimes to read her the latest email from a scholarship student. She always replied with the same words. "You've gone farther than anyone ever expected, even yourself." I was no longer the girl driven by a need to prove something to the world. I no longer had to strain to be seen. One October morning, I was invited back to Bradley West University to speak at the orientation for incoming freshmen. I stood before an auditorium of nearly 400 people, faces still wide-eyed in their new environment, eyes silently asking, "Am I good enough? Do I belong here?" I began with a story. Not about awards, not about a six-figure salary, but about the night my father interrupted dinner to say I was a bad investment. The room went quiet. Some faces showed a flicker of recognition. I knew that feeling. I had once sat where they were, clinging to silence like a paper-thin shield against a judgmental world. I looked them straight in the eye. "I'm not standing here because I was the top of my class. I'm here because I was once seen as the bottom, and I chose not to believe it." I told them about the 4:30 a.m. shifts, about nights sleeping beside a rumbling mini-fridge in a shared room, about crying not from sadness but from exhaustion so deep it blurred the line between pain and weariness. Then I paused, took a deep breath, and said the most important thing. "If anyone ever made you believe you don't belong, remember, that's their limit, not yours." As I left the auditorium, a student ran up to me. He didn't say much, just one sentence. "You don't know it, but today you stopped me from giving up." I turned to him, gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "No one can take your worth from you, unless you hand it over." I used to think success meant finally being acknowledged, that someday my parents would post a picture of me with a caption like, "So proud of our amazing daughter." But I was wrong. Success doesn't come when others stand up to applaud. It comes when you look back and realize you don't need them anymore. And it comes when you do the right thing, even when no one's watching. It comes when you help someone else avoid walking the same lonely road you once did. I don't live to please the ones who underestimated me. I live to honor what I know I deserve. And sometimes being underestimated is life's cruelest gift, because it forces you to chart a different map, one not bound by anyone else's route. A path that, bumpy as it may be, leads to the only place that matters: self-recognition. Toward the end of the year, I sat with Claire and Martha at our favorite little bakery. The waitress brought over a cake that read, "Happy first year of the North Light Scholarship." I smiled, not because of the words, but because of the moment. Claire raised her cup of tea, clinking it lightly against mine. "No one can deny you anymore," she said. I shook my head. "I don't need their denial or approval. I just need to know that if I had to do it all over again, I'd still choose exactly this." Martha nodded slowly. "Because you know who you are." I looked out the window. The season had turned. Dry leaves drifted down the sidewalk. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. No more weight of proving, no more craving to be seen, just a young woman, finally grown enough to understand I am who I am, not because someone said so, but because I dared to believe it long before the world ever did. Melanie's story is a powerful reminder that being underestimated isn't the end, it can be the beginning. In real life, many are doubted by their own families or environments, forced to push forward through scarcity and skepticism. But it's in those very moments that willpower, resilience, and belief in one's own worth lay the foundation for lasting success. You don't need validation to be valuable. You just need the courage to live as who you truly are. What are your thoughts on Melanie's journey? Have you ever been in her shoes? Share your perspective in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.